I always say I don't have the answer, but I can help you determine the questions to help you find the right answer.
Today I'm talking with Mary Beth Hagen, founder and CEO of Titan Aesthetic, who spent over 20 years at companies like Allergan and Medisys before becoming the only person in the country doing what she does: screening, training, and placing aesthetic injectors into the right practices, and helping those practices build the teams and financial foundations to actually last. So how are you this morning?
I am good. And I appreciate the opportunity to chat a little bit about Titan.
Yeah.
When you look at aesthetic medicine, it's such a hot area in wellness right now. And there's so much out there that is online and social media that is intriguing, but there's so much that's not accurate. And I think one of the things that is super interesting is just thinking about what questions should people be asking before they go to see an aesthetic provider, and what questions should they ask when they get there? Because peptides are so hot right now. And I laugh all the time because everybody's like, oh, peptides. Oh, do you know anything about peptides? I'm like, that category is like saying, do you know anything about politics? It's really huge. Everybody has a different idea of what it means. Everybody wants it to do something different. And there's no regulation and lots of fraud. So
yeah. Well, and I would say too, most of the time, like this podcast is really coming at it more from the provider practitioner standpoint rather than the consumer standpoint. So I'll be curious to hear kind of like how you talk to your providers about educating people on those things, and what do they put out in the world as far as marketing that helps people make decisions about whether this is right for them or not.
And that's the most important thing, because a good provider isn't trying to sell lots and lots of products and services. They're trying to educate. But before you can educate, you have to really understand what the consumer or the patient, when they're in a medical practice, which most of these treatments should be done in medical practices. And maybe, Shannon, that's a good place to start. Titan Aesthetic has been around for 10 years. We'll finish our 10th year, or started our 11th year, June 1st. I had spent about over 10 years in aesthetic medicine with Medisys, which is the maker of Restylane, and then with Allergan, and had done things like be the Botox product manager and work with the national accounts and all the groups that are expanding all over the country so rapidly now. And one of the things that I noticed early on was that this is really a specialty where the RNs, the NPs, and the PAs are, in many cases, the expert providers, because that's what they do all day long. If you talk to a dermatologist, they're treating dermatology diseases. If you talk to a surgeon, they are trained to cut. And so when you think about aesthetic medicine, it really has been a specialty that was created by RNs, NPs, and PAs. And they are ones that have kind of become the experts in that. But they're also really good educators in many cases. And that's why I think they've done so well. So Titan literally just supports RNs, NPs, and PAs who are working in aesthetic medicine, primarily here in the United States. We do some work in Canada through Tracy Hatta's THMA. But what we do really is focus on how do we help them understand where they can get good training? How do we help them know how they're going to best be able to reach and educate patients that walk through their doors, and where do they want their careers to go, so that it fits their interests, their needs, and what their patients are looking for. So it's a fun space, and I'm kind of the only person in the country that does this.
Yeah, and you're like, I feel like you're speaking my language, because when I start working with people, you got into business to do something, but what do you really want your life to look like? Like, let's start there, and we can design a business that supports that, rather than getting 5 or 10 years into business and realizing this isn't taking me where I want it to go. And so I love that that's part of your mission too.
Well, and you hit a really key point there, Shannon, because so many people that I work with are amazing providers, and they know how to treat patients. They know how to educate patients. They do not know how to run a business, because you think about nursing school, there are no finance classes. There are no accounting classes. There are no, how do I read a P&L class? And so a lot of what we try to do also is help match people who are working in or running aesthetic businesses with people who have expertise that they may not have, that can help them better fill out that total career path of running a business and being a provider.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's true, Mary Beth, in almost every profession that people go into, right? I mean, you think about plumbers, you think about yoga teachers, even doctors. These are professional people, your RNs. And even me as an accountant, honestly, I was taught how to analyze the hell out of everybody else's business. And I can read a P&L, but there's still a difference in running your own business and managing your own cash. And so I think it's very true across the board, and definitely in the med spa space as well, aesthetics. So I'm kind of curious to take a step back before we get too far into finances and just ask in terms of daily operations, what are you seeing working really well right now for some of your clients? And then what are some of the biggest hurdles they're facing in terms of running a smooth business?
It's an easy question to answer, to be quite honest, because almost every single practice that I work with has the same issue. Number one is, how do I hire and find the right people who have skills, the
Mm,
talent, the culture, and the personality? I mean, I hate to say it, but you have to be able to talk to people, you have to be able to listen, and you have to all get along. So, how do you find and hire the right people? Number two, how do you develop them? And number three, how do you keep them? And probably something that is not unique to the aesthetic specialty, but it's something that is really funny because a lot of people, especially people in small businesses, they're so in tune with what they've wanted to create with starting their own business. And sometimes they forget that you've got to share that vision, or you have to find people who can share that vision. So that's why we work a lot with helping people. We have developed a screening process that's called the Titan Screening Assessment, that we really ask questions. Every industry has their unique aptitude, skills, inherent talents that you need to have to do well in that business. And aesthetic medicine is no different. If you don't have the aesthetic eye as an aesthetic provider, I don't care how many trainings you go to, you can't teach somebody how to see aesthetically. And so we literally developed a 4-part aesthetic assessment that we do over the phone, because I don't want people thinking about what they look like when I'm talking to them. I want them in their
yeah.
heads. And what we do is we ask them who they are, what motivates them, what encourages them, how are their learning styles, have they created and adapted learning styles as they've gotten into their career, what do they want to have out of their career. And then we ask them some very specific questions about the aesthetic specialty and their hobbies. And so we've been doing this for over 10 years, and it's really helpful for a lot of practice owners, whether they are providers or whether they are business people, to help them really understand how will this person fit into their practice from a specialty standpoint and from a cultural standpoint. And then you start thinking about, okay, we've hired the right person. How do we develop them? And getting them that additional education. I don't know if there are as many specialties in medicine that have grown and changed as fast as aesthetic medicine. I mean, every single week there is a new product, there's a new category, there's a new something. And there is still no academic training process. There is no residency nor mentorship program. There is no degree certification that says I am a registered aesthetic provider. There is one board specialty certification, the Certified Aesthetic Nurse Specialist exam. And you have to be an RN or an NP to take that. You can't take it if you're a PA or a physician or a dentist or something else. And so the frustration we've run into in this specialty is it's growing, it's changing, it's expanding exponentially. And there are no qualifications, there are no certifications, there are no national specialty organizations. There is a different what's allowed in every single state in the country. It is incredibly difficult to manage.
Yeah.
And that's why, with having been in the specialty over 20 years, I at least sometimes can help people. I always say I don't have the answer, but I can help you determine the questions to help you find the right answer. So
Yeah,
how do you
point you
find what
toward the
education is
answers.
necessary? How do you find ethical training? And who are the people that can do it well and give accurate information and not just make pretty YouTube dancing videos? And
Yeah.
then the final thing is, how do you retain employees? So we work a lot with practices. First, you have to communicate. Tell them what your vision is, tell them what you want to achieve, tell them what your goals are, make sure they know where they fit into that practice. Number two, make sure you educate. Do they continue to develop and grow their skills? And number three, do you appreciate them and celebrate
Yeah.
that? So communicate, educate, and appreciate. And that has a tendency, if you can do those three things, to be able to hire, educate, and retain really good employees. And that, to be a very long answer to your question, Shannon, is what are the three biggest issues that I see out there right now?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Mary Beth, because it segues very beautifully, I think, right into then what are the biggest financial wins that you've seen clients have recently, and then also their challenges. And I'm just imagining turnover is a huge financial metric that
Mhm.
we are tracking when we're working with clients. So I'm imagining it might be that if it's something different, of course. I'm open to hearing what that is too.
Well, there are two things that have happened in aesthetic medicine in the last, really since COVID. It has been increasingly something that people are aware of and interested in and looking for information on. But it's also been a time where private equity has come into this space, and private equity backed managed service organizations have started buying up practices or trying to create their own practices. So that puts pressure on having enough providers who know what they're doing, who are educated to be able to perform those services. So when you think about the financial impact of it, yes, there's a lot of money in hiring, training, and then if you lose that person, but because private equity has come in and said, oh, we want to buy your practice, so many people who are aesthetic providers have said, well, I don't want to work for a practice that's going to sell to private equity and they're going to make a lot of money. I want to start a practice that can sell to private equity and then I make the money. And then you've got the opposite end of it, which is, you know what? I don't want to be in a business. I want to be in a medical practice. I just want to see and treat patients. And I once had someone who's the head of a managed service organization that's works with a large funding group. And he said, well, Mary Beth, how do you coach the injectors that you work with so that they understand that they're always going to have a quota? They're always going to have to do more next month. They're always going to be expected to produce more. And I told him, you know what? That's not my job because that's not what every practice does. That may be a goal for a private equity organization and their funding backers, but when you are a medical provider, whether you take a Hippocratic oath as a physician or whether you look at your nursing and your mandates as a provider, your job is to be a good healthcare provider who offers effective and safe treatments and educates the patient along the way so they have their expectations match the results that you can provide. And so I think we've got a huge dichotomy of expectations in the specialty right now, and the financial impact and expectation doesn't always match. What I think a lot of people don't understand is the margins in aesthetic medicine are incredibly tiny. And people read things about how much money, the billions of dollars in aesthetic medicine, and they don't realize that most of that goes to the industry side, the manufacturers, the vendors, the software. God knows if one more person calls with a new software update that they think is going to bring in every lead and everybody you've ever noticed, I'm like, I'm sorry, that doesn't work. It's great to get people aware, but people do not pick up the phone and call and book a patient appointment at a practice because of an AI generated lead. They pick up the phone and call to book a particular practice because they talked to somebody who said, this is a great provider. You should go see them. I know, I'm like...
No, you're totally fine. It's all so related. And that's why I love to do these conversations, right? Because they are all related. There's not one aspect of business that doesn't affect your finances and that doesn't affect your daily operations. I tell business owners all the time, every decision you make, we will see the impact on it in your financial statement at some point. And I will ask a question and you'll have to go back 6 months and say, oh yeah, that's because I decided to buy this software, or that's because I decided to do this marketing thing, or whatever it is.
I lost that provider, or I bought that equipment. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
All shows up eventually.
Well, and sales is such an interesting thing, Shannon, because words are so easy. I mean, you think about you and I right now, just sitting talking, it is so easy to talk about these things, but that whole proof is in the pudding. I tell my clients never, ever, ever sign a contract unless you have been able to have a vendor show you how they have achieved results. Either here's what I will do for you, here's how you can measure that I'm doing what I'm saying I'm going to do, and here's what's going to happen if I don't meet the expectations that you and I agreed upon beforehand. We do that when we're treating the patients. Not me, I'm not a provider, but I think we really have to understand, in some ways, we're back to the snake oil salesman with some of the things people are trying to sell. And between social media and what we see on Instagram and Snapchat or TikTok, things can look really, really great. How many times do you buy something online and it's perfect and exactly what they advertise? I love the sites where they show, I ordered this online and here's what it showed me I was going to buy and here's what I got. And I think that happens all too often these days. And that goes into the financial consideration of your business. Yeah,
absolutely. I love having those objective metrics when you're working with a vendor, right? And like you said, I feel like the snake oil stuff comes about when we just have these subjective promises, right? The words that you were talking about. And when you have those objective objective metrics that you're tracking, and you know 30,
Yeah.
60, 90 days, this is what I should be expecting or seeing or whatever it is, it makes it more black and white. It's easier to determine, like, is this something I want to continue? Or it's pretty easy. No, you're not living up to your promises. I'm not going to keep doing this
Well, and
thing.
Shannon, what you guys probably do with Fit for Profit when you're talking to someone about their expectations from a financial standpoint, I'm sure you never say, okay, let's just see what the salespeople come in with, and then we'll just, pick and choose what sounds really good. You sit down, you create a goal, you say, here's what we want to achieve this year. Here's the metrics or the parameters of how we're going to measure that. When someone comes in and supports us or wants us to do business with them, we're going to say, does this fit into a key piece of meeting our goal? If yes, okay, how do we do that? If not, we make them go away. And I do the exact same thing. I teach our clients before you ever meet with a sales rep, you have to know what are your goals? What do you already have to achieve those goals? And where are your gaps? And every time you sit down with a vendor, you don't ask them, hey, what do you have for me today? You say, I want to start this meeting by reminding you, here are my business goals for this quarter or for this year. Here's where we're doing really well, but here are a couple gaps that I have. Let's talk about how your product, your services, your treatments can help me achieve my goal in these areas where I have gaps. And if we can do that, then we hit the business goals and have our financial opportunities that hopefully will work out well. But then we also do a really good job of monitoring who's trying to get involved in our business and who's trying to sway us away from achieving our goal.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Mary Beth. I mean, that is really what we talk about all the time. Like, what are your goals? Making sure that we're on track for those goals. The only piece that I would add in that I'm really proud of our work here at Fit for Profit is we really also try to get our clients to very clearly identify their values, which you've already talked about early, right? That's part of the culture that you're working at when you're hiring people, making sure that they fit your values. And also when you're working with salespeople and products, do those things fit the values that you want to help your patients with, right? Is it ethical? Is it the things that you feel good about providing as an owner, as a provider, those types of things? And so that's the one piece that we bring into the money conversation all the time is like, what are your values? And in money, it goes beyond like the ethics of the practice and the products and things like that. It's like, what do you value for your business? Why did you start your business? Is it for freedom? Is it for safety? Who knows? There's every value under the moon gets incorporated into different people's businesses. But keeping that in mind also when you're making
And
those
that's part of
decisions is
that
so
communicate
important.
with your employees as
Yes.
well, because values are something that should be easy for you to communicate with employees. And then you're all on the same page with what you want to achieve. They don't always have to know the numbers. I think it's good to know the percentages. We talk a lot about if you own a business, you don't have to tell them how much money is coming in and how much money you're taking, but make a pie chart. Here's 100% of what we brought in. Here's what we pay out in salary or compensation. Here's what goes to product purchases because there's huge cost to cost of goods in aesthetic medicine. And let them see that pie and exactly how do we make the pie bigger? Because most everybody at some point in their life, it's like going to say, I'd like a raise. I'd like to make a little bit more money. Well, you can do that when you make the pie bigger. But making the pie bigger a lot of times goes back to what are our values? Why are we doing what we're doing? And that's in aesthetic medicine. It's kind of expanded into this crazy anti-aging and wellness. And there's all this stuff that's coming into it now that is not well understood. And I think that makes some people's values kind of start running in different directions. And as people start experimenting and bringing new things in, sometimes they lose that root cause of why they started that practice. And so you're exactly right to come back to those values, come back to your why. It's a really important thing every day.
Yeah. So I want to ask one more question about values. I find some of our clients sometimes have a tension between the value of wellness or helping clients, and then it's not really a value, but around profitability in general. And like, how do we balance those two things? So I'm
Yeah.
curious your thoughts
The
on that.
juxtaposition of here are values versus here are our quarterly expectations for what we need to. There's two things. Sometimes you've had the ability to be able to support your values. And like I said, one of the things I do is I work a lot with organizations that are private equity backed that are acquiring practices. And I work with the organization and I work with the practices that they're acquiring. And it literally is like creating a new language sometimes because you have to merge the expectations from a financial standpoint, because that's why private equity is doing it. They're not doing it because they want to provide better health care, which is a whole nother conversation. But a lot of times these practices are who they are because values of why they started the practice, because of the safety and efficacy of how they provide the services, and because of the culture and the people who work in that practice. And sometimes that can really be dichotomous and not be in sync. And that's one of those things that how do you have that conversation? Sometimes the money that the private equity groups dangle looks really, really good. And if you're a 55 or 60-year-old provider and you've had your practice for 10 years and you're like, yeah, this would be nice to not have to take care of the HR stuff and the finance stuff and the, benefit stuff, and this group can do it for me. Are you still going to be able to have those values? And those are questions you have to ask before you do the deal, because I have a lot that I work with who've done that to the deal question asking. Sometimes it's just really hard.
And I just want to remind people that it is possible to have profitability and values and be in alignment in those things and still achieve all of your goals and dreams. It does not mean that you can't be profitable and therefore you can't make money at doing the things that you love doing, helping people. Like, there is a balance between the two. And you're right, private equity doesn't have those values in mind. And I feel like that's where the profitability gets a higher weight, a higher importance, and we lose sight of what we're doing for our patients on a regular
Shannon,
basis.
For any of the aesthetic practices that might be listening to this because they know me or whatever, when you're working with someone as a new client, what do you expect them to have or know before they start working with you so that you can have a really good opportunity to help them achieve their goals? What do you want them to come to the table with when they start working with you?
I mean, ideally, they have a really good set of books that we can look back over the course of their business, right? And start to see trends and understand what is really happening in the business. What are the costs of doing business that they've already agreed to, right? Because we can start to make changes to those things.
They got to have.
Yeah, exactly. What are the sunk costs? If you've already invested in equipment, like you have it, you're under contract, we can't do anything about it. We can't have the conversations that we hope to have going forward before that are past. We can't do anything about that.
But that next question then becomes, how much revenue are you bringing in and how much is the net profit from the revenue you're bringing in for that device? Is it covering the cost of the lease payment on the device? If not, then we have a to-do list for your marketing team and for sales team. And for your provider team to make sure they know. You'll love this because I've told this story a couple of times, but I giggle. I have one client and she wanted to buy a machine in the worst way. And she went to her team and they said, no, we don't believe in that device. We don't think it's going to work. We don't want it. Don't buy it. She bought it anyway. And then she's really mad at her team because they don't want to use it and they don't want to do services with that device. And so I asked her, I have a question for you. And she said, I know what you're going to ask. You're going to ask, why did I ask my team's advice if I was going to go ahead and buy it anyway? I said, oh, my question is, why did you buy it anyway when your team, who are the medical providers, told you they weren't going to use it? And, and I think one of those things, we have to have goals, we have to have values, but that communicate part, it goes both ways. And you don't have your team on board with the goals, with the values, and the expectations of what has to happen with the resources you have that you're spending money on in your business, you're going to give yourself a nice little roadblock to achieving some of your goals.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, the communication goes both ways, right? You have to listen as much as you talk. And when they tell you no, like you have to be willing, if you're going to ask, you have to be willing to hear whatever the answer is and then take the advice. Exactly. So awesome. Well, Mary Beth, this was so much fun. I really enjoyed our conversation today. Is there anything else that kind of came to your mind that you wanted to be sure to say or ask as we had a conversation?
The only thing is, if anybody, I always laugh. I talk a lot about what I do. I talk a lot about the specialty. I sometimes forget to say Titan Aesthetic. So titanesthetic.com if there's any questions, and hopefully we can set things up. So if you work with Shannon, you can have a really great financial outcome. And if you work with Shannon and you're in aesthetic medicine and you want to look at more of the employee communicate, educate, and appreciate opportunities, we can help you with that as well.
Awesome. So thank you so much. Like I said, it was great to chat with you and look forward to talking to you again soon.
You too, Shannon. Thank you.
Awesome. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Behind the Numbers. If today's conversation resonated with you, subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss a new episode every week. And if you're a health or wellness business owner who's ever wondered what's really going on behind your own numbers, I'd love to talk. Head to fitforprofit.com to learn more or book a complimentary clarity call. We'll see you next week.